With more characters releasing with every new patch in Reverse 1999, I was once again curious about the backstories of some of the characters. And just like I've done before, in this video I want to take a deep dive into understanding few characters that I found really interesting. So let's start with Anan Lee. Anan Lee actually has so many references of Hong Kong, which I found really cool. In the game, she's often seen referring to herself by her Cantonese name Nai Mang Dixie. Now in Hong Kong, there are taxis called Nai Mang Dixie. Nai Mang meaning a rabbit fish, which are pretty rare. And rabbit fish in this context refers to the fact that these taxis are rogue. And the interesting thing about these taxis is that they work out the cost of travel through verbal negotiations rather than using an actual meter. So if we consider this inspiration for Anan Lee's name and her character, it's really cool to see that even within the game, she's often seen discussing price for work or buying a house through verbal negotiations, essentially winging everything and going with the flow, which really emphasizes her eccentric and rogue characteristics. Now speaking of her house, apparently she rented an apartment when she was 8 years old in Kowloon, Hong Kong. Now Kowloon, which was also known as the Walled City, was a densely populated city in the 1990s, but because of the city's chaotic layout and eerie outer appearance, it often gave off ghostly perceptions, which at times led to ghost stories and supernatural tales. And this was further magnified when the entire city was completely demolished in 1994. I personally found this reference really interesting because the entire story of Anan Lee being a ghostbuster was directly linked to her hometown as well, which was pretty cool. Now let's talk about her aesthetics. Anan Lee's characteristics clearly resemble a Ghostbuster, and as it turns out, besides the theme of Ghostbusters that we might already be aware of, her concept also comes from an eccentric comedic Hong Kong horror film called Out of the Dark. Her outfit seems to be inspired by one of the lead characters in the movie called Quan. The megaphone was a weapon of choice in catching ghosts, and the lily, a literal plant that was personified into a character that can apparently detect spiritual energies, is also showcased in Anan Lee's backpack, and as she describes it, the flower actually has a name and it's Lily. Her in-game voice line refers to using plastic wraps and chocolate as a technique for catching ghosts, and even her alt animation also recalls aspects of the movies like the good luck charm hanging on the door and the rocking chair near the start of the film. Personally, I really loved researching about Anan Lee because of how her entire story seems to be interconnected with her name and even down to her culture, and all seemingly relating to her eccentric character as a Ghostbuster. Now speaking of eccentric characters, let's talk about one of the hottest characters inside the entire game. When it comes to Centurion, there were a couple things that I honestly couldn't quite figure out. From her backstory, she is obviously of Mexican descent, and that much is very clear from her voice lines.
Intentarlo de nuevo?
And after a bit of digging, we can also learn that she was born in Las Vegas during the 1900s, but I really wasn't sure why her name was Centurion to begin with. If you didn't know, the term Centurion comes from Roman military associating with their commander, which is really badass in and of itself, but what does Roman Empire have anything to do with United States or Mexico during the 1900s? And along with this curiosity, Centurion is also seen in the game with her golden lucky coin that she carries with everywhere. Well, as it turns out, this golden coin is speculated to be Solidus, a pure golden coin during the late Roman Empire. And ever since obtaining this coin as an infant, everything she did always had good fortune. Whether she was gambling or doing her crazy stunts for her shows, helping her become a huge celebrity in the world of Reverse 1999. Now this golden coin being Solidus makes some sense since it's related to Roman Empire just like her name, but as for how or why she got the coin is a little bit unclear. But honestly, maybe these are all less of a direct references, but more of a overall inspiration. The lucky coin being a good luck charm, and her name reflecting someone very important or just a badass in general. But to be fair, in Las Vegas, there are many architectural themes that relates to the Roman Empire, for example, Caesar's Palace or the Colosseum and many other landmarks in the city. And when it comes to Mexico during the 1900s, mining gold played a significant role in Mexico's economic and social landscapes, even through the turmoils of the Great Depression. And if we go full circle, the Great Depression essentially enabled the legalization of gambling in Las Vegas, where Centurion was born and raised. And if these were the inspirations used for Centurion, I think that's pretty awesome. After all, when it comes to video games, not everything needs to make perfect sense because usually video games have their own fantastical settings. Now on a different note, the reason why I found Centurion so cool was because of the way she lives her life. Always living in the moment and striving to enjoy everything she does. And living this carefree life, it gives her the opportunity to explore different places, cultures, and meeting new people. But hilariously, this does lead her into some tricky situations because she would often gravitate towards dangerous and risky situations. You know, things like doing your crazy stunts. But thankfully, she has her lucky coin of unparalleled fortune that bails her out on a daily basis. And it's crazy if you think about it because she's literally got a cheat code to life in the palm of her hands. With all that said, I actually ended up liking Centurion even more after my research because no matter what, just as her name suggests, she's just a badass character that is unfazed by anything. I really do hope that in the story of Reverse 1999, we'll get to see more of her, maybe in the future main story or the events. But speaking of events, let's talk about our newest character that was released with version 1.2, Jessica. When it comes to Jessica, it's very clear that a lot of her concepts are that of a fictional character created for the story of Reverse 1999. Now that's not to say there aren't few real-life references, but to help us find these clues, let's start with what Jessica even is. We know that Jessica is a name given to her by Blondie when they were younger, but from the lore within the game, we learn that Jessica is a changeling. But what does this really mean? More specifically, what is her origin? At the end of the event story, Madam Z explains that Jessica was one of the test subjects of Xeno Army, and through their cultivation of Militarized Critter Weapons Authorization Act, Jessica was born, who was then eventually got left behind at the Green Lake. Now if we take a look at Jessica's story, the Xeno Army used two things to give birth to Jessica. First, a North American deer woman, and second, a changeling from Ireland. A deer woman, or sometimes known as a deer lady, is a spiritual entity within Native American mythology. They were known to lure men into their deaths if they harmed women or children. Now while this might not be entirely the same for Jessica's story in a Nightmare at Green Lake event, luring people into death does kinda give off the horror story vibe in and of itself. And along with this concept, the appearance of a deer woman or deer lady is seen as a sign of personal transformation. And in a very cool way, Jessica directly affected Blondie's self-improvements and personal growth. Now as for the changeling from Ireland, there are multiple instances in the game where Jessica talks about a dream that she often has. A vision of a soft grassy plains even though she's never seen one herself, which I suspect to be the genetic memories of her changeling mother from Ireland. And with that in mind, there are also a couple other references of Ireland to Jessica's story. Specifically, the tin whistle that Tooth Fairy gives to Jessica, and these tin whistles are sometimes known as penny whistles, are traditional Irish instruments associated with Celtic music. And even the mention of the penny whistle was hinted at the beginning of A Nightmare at Green Lake intro cinematics. Now regardless of these cool inspirations and references, I do find Jessica to be endearing and precious because obviously she went through a lot. However, it'd be a lie for me to say that she doesn't give off some crazy creepy vibes. Her unfortunate circumstances of lacking social skills and past genetic experiments could cause some possibilities that maybe with the flip of a switch, she could go absolutely crazy and cause havoc across the entire foundation. But hopefully that's not the case. Thankfully, Verton and her friends are taking good care of her and gave her a very positive outlook for the future. But could Jessica be a ticking time bomb? Or will she be able to find true happiness regardless of her past? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe Jessica's lore will be revisited in the future story of Reverse 1999. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe, and I once again want to give a special thank you to the team of Reverse 1999 for sponsoring this video, because every time I make these videos, it's been an absolute blast learning about these characters inside the game. And if you want to learn more about these characters on your own, check out the ongoing event and dive into the game yourselves. And make sure to follow Reverse 1999's social media pages, which I will link in the description below for additional news and information of upcoming events and patches. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.